Hi, I'm Wyatt Cash with Scoop News Group, and we're here at FedTalks with Eva Skidmore, Vice President, Global Public Sector at Salesforce. Eva, thanks for joining us. Glad that you're here.
Thanks for having me, Wyatt. Always a pleasure.
Let me first ask, how has federal technology played a critical role in 2020 as an unprecedented pandemic has rocked our nation?
That's a great question. You know, the global coronavirus pandemic has shined a light on just how significant a role that the federal government plays in solving problems that overwhelm the ability of state government and the private sector to act in a coordinated way. However, I also think the pandemic has made clear that the federal government has glaring issues with outdated legacy technology, and they were just beginning to be addressed when the pandemic hit. So a couple of things related to that. I mean, more than ever before, federal agencies need the ability to develop, deploy, and scale new applications and digital services really, really fast in record time. And so that means advancing long anticipated digital transformations to use no code and SaaS first cloud infrastructure that offers that fast, ready built solution that can be scaled to meet evolving challenges. And then secondly, I would say that throughout 2020, the federal government struggled with issues that the private sector was a little bit better equipped to manage, such as how to provide employees with the tools and the things they needed to work remotely successfully. So that outdated technology and those lack of existing resources hampered that smooth and timely transition to full-time remote operations, even though they really needed to continue service. So, you know, internally, federal agencies needed to develop those tools and protocols that allow agencies to track and manage that criteria for reopening safely. And things like contact tracing, quarantine management, vaccine management. There was a survey earlier this year of federal employees that showed that 80% of those working remotely are afraid to work and return to the workplace in the near term, which means that getting the return to work right will be vital to retaining those employees. So just like the public sector, or just like the private sector, technology has been key to allowing federal agencies to reopen safely so they can get and continue to execute on their mission wherever they are.
Well, next, let me ask, how can the federal government not only build on some of these new advances, but even leapfrog ahead in using modern and emerging technologies like cloud and AI and automation?
It's also a good question. The rise of digital platforms has provided constituents with the ability to have the world at their fingertips. So this shift in consumer-focused application experiences is really rapidly driving expectations from the public sector as well. So constituents expect to access their user-friendly platforms in all aspects of their lives, and that puts pressure on governments to undergo significant transformation to keep up with business and consumer experience innovations in the private sector. You know, the pandemic has accelerated that need for digital engagement transformation as in-person services and those teams that power them go virtual. Spotlights the roles that governments play in the lives of its constituents and how important it is for them to accelerate digital transformation with the latest technologies and really to scale and provide that long-term benefit beyond the pandemic. You know, we're all really getting used to this. Technology is essential in reestablishing a connection with the government, and it has to be reliable and accessible and effective to build that trust with the next generation of constituents. So to get closer to answering your question, utilizing the new emerging tech like AI, Internet of Things, automation, et cetera, it all requires a robust platform that lives in the cloud. And these technologies are most potent when used together, which means that the agency technology leaders need that full 360-degree view into their digital interactions with constituents. And they're beginning with a single source of truth. That's really important. So that digital first experience, many existing legacy systems use paper-based processes and they're slow and duplicative. The methods are too repetitive and really open the door for errors that slow the process. So introducing those new technologies and those digital solutions that are responsive and easier to navigate and really enable the employees to provide accurate, timely, and trustworthy government services, it really is important. They're delivering experiences that feel personal and targeted and customer focused. And that way they can drive more trust and satisfaction with their government interaction.
I think you'd agree it also takes the right talent. How is the federal government working in new and creative ways to bring talented technologists to its workforce?
Oh, that's a big one. I mean, I think, the top problems holding back the federal government's ability to attract top talent, one of those big challenges is the prolonged time it takes to get hired. And then also the challenge of even finding what opportunities exist. A recent report by the Partnership for Public Service stated that it takes around 98 days for the average federal employee to make it through the hiring process. And that's far longer than it takes to be hired at a tech company. And that becomes a major obstacle for workers who need to find a job quickly. The report also talked about that the average tech worker is really unaware of the extent of the government's operations and what opportunities might be available to them. So the idea is that like a prospect who's trying to obtain a job in cybersecurity might look at NSA or Department of Homeland Security, but they may be unaware that there's a need for cybersecurity professionals across the federal government in many different agencies. So in looking at those new jobs and new roles, the federal government may have, these human capital issues, particularly related to technology. And there are many more workers who may want to serve the country and would consider public service if we can lower the barriers to entry. The global pandemic has made clear that the federal government is, there's so many opportunities, and just how we think about training and making sure that the workforce is skilled to deliver what the federal government needs and meet the needs of the constituents is critical.
Well, finally, what other trends or priorities do you have on your radar as we head into 2021?
Yeah, thank you. I think there are three things. One is rapid IT modernization and emergency COVID-19 funding. The second is infrastructure spending. And then the third would be national contact tracing and vaccine management. So when I think about the rapid IT modernization, what level of commitment will Congress and federal agencies show to ramping up digital technology to address the pandemic? And we really need to see significant funding that prioritizes digital transformation that addresses both the pandemic's near-term and long-term consequences. Infrastructure spending. What does the federal government spending on building out infrastructure look like, and what technologies are deployed to help manage that process across the country? I mean, suppose the federal government is committed to spending a massive amount of money on improving our nation's infrastructure. In that case, we need systems in place to manage programs of that size effectively. And then the third thing I would say is what role will cloud-based systems play in national emergency response that has been mostly non-existent to this point? So while the federal government has spent massive amounts of money to drive the development of a coronavirus vaccine with the pharmaceutical industry, there's been a noticeable lack of planning to implement that effective contact tracing and prepare for the eventual rollout of the vaccine. So we need to be thinking through these systems on a national level and be prepared to interact with the state level processes and coordinate with private healthcare delivery systems.
Well, those are some great points. Eva Skidmore, thank you so much for joining us here at FedTalks. We always appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a wonderful day.